From the abundant promotional material showing how creator-driven and like no other Marvel movie this was, and especially from minute one of this, with a Marvel Studios intro that went so incredibly hard, this movie promised something special. And while I definitely don't think this was unlike anything we'd seen before, it does break from the, at this point, tired Marvel mold just enough to stand out amongst the droves of other superhero movies coming out. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, your nihilistic optimist, and the Thunderbolts, asterisk, is a movie I wanted to love, but sadly didn't. Yet, it is undeniably great. But allow me to clarify. At the heart of it, my biggest issue was that I wanted more from the emotional side. There are scenes that tug at the heartstrings and succeed at what they're doing, but with the heavy themes, I think I just wanted a smidge more contemplation. I appreciate how character-driven it is, and there's even a narrative tool to see some internal personal struggles, but I could have used more of that from Bucky, Ava, Alexi, Taskmaster, I could look up her name, but I'm not gonna, even John, the last of which did get a bit of that meaningful character struggle. And Alexi also brings the team together with lighthearted fun and comedy, all of which, even the rare occasions that weren't from him, never overshadowed the stakes ever present in the non-stop narrative. And Bucky does get an awesome introduction with him looking like the Terminator and some spine-tingling music over top. But nevertheless, all of those secondary characters pretty much take a back seat, and I definitely could have used more of the team together, yet that never really bothered me. Besides, the choice to focus on Yelena rather than a scattershot approach was a great call. From her performance to the character's internal struggle against the lonely void infecting her that we all feel at times, Yelena is a fascinating central point to expand out from and prop the rest of the story off of. Though that's not entirely true, because the real catalyst for the story is Allegra. Her getting the characters together allowed for a compelling wrinkle, leading to a story that was simple, not by the numbers, but straightforward in the best way possible, because that seeded the spotlight to really shine on the characters, that and the overall filmmaking. And there are moments in this where it really feels like a film.
You know, my favorite thing about the movie is it feels like a movie.
As in, a step up in intentional decisions made in the production and cinematography. Decisions that come together to make a sequence that will stick with you long after you leave the theater. And I'm mainly just talking about the times when shadows were used really well, but not just in the one way you're probably thinking of. The action as well is wild and frenetic, yet somehow all the while smooth and in a completely understandable way, if that makes sense. Until the end, there's multiple players each vying for their own separate end goal, all in clear, wide shots, each ranging on the longer side, that allow you to drink in every bit of stunt work and VFX at play. That being said, the action is pretty sparse, but I think a lot of that had to do with the writers not wanting to cram a fight scene in every 20 minutes, as that would get in the way of the necessary character building dialogue. I'm also okay with the, I'll admit, lacking action, because what we got was entertaining. I just talked about longer takes in general, but without giving away what they are, there are a couple one-take fight scenes that had my jaw on the floor. But all in all, the Thunderbolts is a captivating experience, and I cannot wait to go spend even more of my hard-earned money on this to watch it again. And I highly recommend any fan of superheroes, the MCU, or just plain old good movies to go check this out. I can't say it's the definitive return for Marvel some have been hailing it as, but with this and Fantastic Four seeming to be driven by creative visions that put the character drama and genuine visuals first, I do have hope for Marvel's future, though that remains skeptical. But with that unsurprising recommendation out of the way, whoa, who else saw that coming that I'd give an overall positive review to this obviously entertaining movie? But I want to get deeper into the weeds of the potential just at the cusp of being delivered on that didn't carry it home for me. But to do that, I gotta talk spoilers. So you ready? Alright. I'll be jumping around a lot, but let's just start at the beginning. As I've already pointed out, we got that cold Marvel Studios intro that set the tone, but right after that, we got a fantastic silent moment of Yelena jumping off the second tallest building in the world, something Florence Pugh actually did. And the voiceover as she does so may be filled with general exposition, but it does a great job of setting up her mental state and the ongoing story, a lot of which could have easily come off as forced, but felt organic and necessary. And I don't really have a good transition for this, but we gotta take a moment of silence to talk about Taskmaster. She does one cool shield bounce thing, then gets shot in the head. Sucks. It doesn't ruin the movie for me, but I do wish Taskmaster was a better character in the MCU. Or at least a character. And now we'll never get that chance. But speaking of not ruining the movie for me, but still putting me off, was the entire third act. I know I'm jumping around a lot, and I will get to the guy you want me to talk about, but jumping around is what I promised. And don't get me wrong, I loved the ending of this movie, but my biggest concern walking in was that the third act would be the Void attacking New York. There wasn't much else it could have been, and I think I'm just getting tired of the ending of a movie being all over its trailers. However, when that started to become clear towards the midpoint, I did sigh in disappointment to myself. It wasn't nearly as bad as Red Hulk in Captain America Brave New World, but it does suck that the entire narrative of Sentry built up to something we'd already seen in the trailers. But if you put that aside, at first, I was still disappointed all the Void did was turn everything into shadow. Yet after giving it a second thought, I think keeping it simple with Sentry and the Void, despite the fact that they can do anything, was another good call. Besides, that visual of seeing people flashed into nuclear shadow was genuinely powerful. I just wish we didn't see it in the trailer. Although there was still a really impactful moment where Red Guardian saves a little girl, and it's during the big heroic team sequence where the music swells, then bam, the little girl gets turned into a nuclear shadow. And then after that we got the trippy inner world of the Void, where I guess you just see your worst memories on loop. Fun. But Yelena breaks her way through to Bob and has a talk with him, which was a nice way to overcome the unstoppable force that is the Void. The rest of the team also go through that same journey of terrible memories to get to Bob's safe room, and I kinda wish we saw some of that, but there was no time. And moving back from the ending, before we get to the other big thing you probably want me to talk about, that is if you stuck around for the second after credit scene, but we're not there yet, is Sentry as a whole. Because if you hadn't noticed, I didn't mention him at all earlier in the non-spoiler section. And that's just because I know there's a world out there in the multiverse where we could walk into the Thunderbolts and have no idea Sentry had anything to do with it. And I frankly want to make this world just a little bit more like that one if I can. All jokes aside, I guarantee Sentry even being in this movie, having that a twist for the movie to tell, let alone the ongoing narrative of his slowly revealed power levels, rather than press outlets and trailers to spoil, would have made the movie 10 times better. And I know that to be the case because I saw this movie with my girlfriend, who had no idea Sentry was in it, or who he was to begin with. And seeing her reactions each time it was further revealed what he was capable of was a whole other movie to me. But when I was paying attention to the Thunderbolts and not my girlfriend, I did appreciate how dark some of Bob's story got, even mentioning some hard drugs multiple times. A place I thought Marvel wasn't allowed to go without Deadpool present. I won't get into the psychology of it all, because I'm not nearly qualified enough to discuss mental health in that capacity, but also just because I'm more fluent in nerd lore, so that I will get into. And in that, the MCU's Robert Reynolds does seem to more or less stick to the comic rules, where he's got two personalities. One of the golden hero, Sentry, symbol for all that is good, and the Void, a dark entity of hate and malice. I suppose there's also Bob, the base model, who should count, he's an important guy, but I'm just more concerned with the other two, whose power levels are technically on Wanda's level of rewriting reality, but thankfully for the citizens often ending up as collateral damage because of him, Sentry and the Void alike only really stick to the basic physical stuff, I guess because that's all they know. That, or they're just not very creative. He's the Plutonian for anyone who understands that reference, and if you do, you don't need me explaining who Sentry is. But all things considered with Sentry and the Void, I think I put it best by comparing his whole narrative to Red Hulk's. There's just something about slapping the final confrontation of the movie all over the marketing that doesn't sit right with me. But to sandwich a positive in with all that negativity, I did mention a couple jaw-dropping one-takes, and one of them was with the Thunderbolts attempting to take down the immovable wall that is Sentry. An albeit cliched kind of sequence, but a cliche that I will never get tired of seeing. Some of the CG with Sentry there and some moments before were on the rubbery, weightless side, but I was willing to forgive it because I was having a great time. Plus, I think there was a short piece of that action where Sentry saw Ghost's power, and and then mimicked them. I don't know, it was really quick and I gotta pay attention to it when I watch it again, but if that's the case, that is so cool. But anyway, let's talk about Allegra. Her every breath being a selfish one, protecting herself and her alone, made for a great villain. And I figured she'd get torn to shreds by the Void, even pointing that out in my speculation video, yet I'm really glad she survived so we can see her ongoing manipulative fight with, I'll just put it simply, the truth. Though I do have to ask if Allegra was going to be taken down anyway, and that all has to do with Wendell Pierce's packet. He was making that out to be a game-breaking element in the case against Allegra. I suppose it doesn't matter because the public loves her now for being the Nick Fury to the new Avengers, something I'm about to talk about real soon, don't worry, but I figured the packet was going to be important in Bucky's journey at least. I don't know, for him to learn about patience or something. I'm fine without that. But unless I'm missing something, it did seem like an unanswered plotline. By the way, staying on the topic of unanswered or at least elements left up in the air, what is Ox Group? I have no clue, but like before, I bet there's something obvious that I'm missing. In Marvel, there's this guy called the Ox, and my first thought was Roxxon or maybe even Oscorp, but other than that, I got nothing. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a Nah, I'm kidding. Let's talk about the true meaning of the asterisk, the new Avengers, which of course, if you didn't know, is an actual comic series running from 2005 and on for quite some time by writer Brian Michael Bendis, and featuring in multiple different events you might be familiar with. And that team has a completely different roster, but I am very excited to see what the MCU chooses to draw from with the usage of that particular name. Fun side note, the new Avengers was one of the first comics I ever read, besides Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, which I read at way too young an age, but that's another side note I already explained in another video. But the new Avengers name makes way more sense publicity-wise than what I was imagining. Nonetheless, I was completely confident they'd be the Dark Avengers. I also thought Norman Osborn, or Zemo, was going to be a secret financial backer to the team and the guy who bought Stark Tower, but hey, a guy can dream. I'm more than fine with what we got, and it being used as the new Avengers Tower doesn't get me entirely reinvigorated in the franchise, but it is a step in the right direction. Yet I think there is something to be said about how too many basement dwellers were given too much time to cook up wild theories on who or what it could have been. Yet with this step taken in the Thunderbolts, me, and I assume many of those basement dwellers, are much more satisfied with where the MCU is at, which is extraordinary considering only a week ago that was not the case. I suppose my one question is if there's going to be enough time in Doomsday to cram in the Avengers versus the new Avengers. I doubt that'll be a major aspect of the next couple Avengers movies, but it does raise an eyebrow from me when that could be the crux of its own movie, and instead it'll probably just be there for 10 minutes. That being said, I'm very excited to see every single new Avenger on this team and the possible dynamics they could have with the actual Avengers team. And I have plenty more to talk about with who's on Sam's team and where the hell they are, plus some thoughts on the young Avengers and how they'll fold into all of this, but I'll save those thoughts for another video. So aside from wanting more of an emotional punch, my biggest problems with this have nothing to do with the movie itself, that being the spoiler-filled trailers and just where the MCU was at beforehand. But that's also my own problem because I'm deliberately inundated with Marvel, superheroes, and movies in general. And even in the process of writing this review, I've started to think about how overwhelmed and thus tired and empty the endless Marvel projects on the slate feel, and this very movie asked that meta question of how to stay fresh with its so many movies down the line in a non-meta way that still gave plenty of commentary on that, plus mental health and manic depression as well, so I should give it credit there. I doubt my opinion on this movie will go anywhere other than up, but I suppose I'll just have to wait and see just how my overall impression compiles with time and a rewatch. Update, I saw it again, and yeah, really the same thoughts. The same positives and negatives remained, and this watch just cemented in my brain everything I talked about before. And looking back very closely at that fight scene with Sentry, it did just seem like he was using super speed and not Ghost's powers. Not like that changes anything, because it's still a phenomenal scene. So for real this time, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.